5.3 Chapter 53 Protection, Isolation, and Switching Devices. Chapter 53 details the requirements for the selection and application of devices used for protection, isolation, switching, control, and monitoring within electrical installations. 5.3.1 discuss the selection and application of devices for protection, isolation, switching, control, and monitoring. Chapter 53 outlines that different types of devices serve different purposes, and each has specific requirements that must be considered during selection and installation. These devices ensure the safety and proper operation of electrical systems. The devices to consider are protection devices. These are designed to protect against electric shock and fire. Isolation devices. These are used to disconnect a circuit or equipment from the electrical supply for safety during maintenance or repair. Switching devices. These are used for various purposes, including functional switching for normal operation and emergency switching to quickly disconnect power in hazardous situations. Control devices. These are used to control the operation of equipment or circuits. Monitoring devices. These are used to monitor the status of an electrical system or equipment. Every type of equipment must be selected and erected to allow compliance with the requirements stated in the regulations. A switching device must not be inserted in the neutral conductor alone, with the exception of specific dimmer controls with contactors within the luminaire itself. Devices embodying more than one function must comply with the requirements of all the chapters appropriate for each separate function. 5.3.2 cover devices for protection against electric shock and fire, as well as devices for isolation, switching, control, and monitoring. Chapter 53 covers devices used for protection against electric shock and fire. Residual current devices, RCDs used for additional protection. RCDs should be selected and erected to limit the risk of unwanted tripping. This includes subdivision of circuits and selection of appropriate RCD types. The general rule for fire protection with RCDs is that they should be no more than 300 mA and installed at the origin of the installation. Arc fault detection devices. AFDDs are specified to be installed at the origin of the final circuit to be protected. Overcurrent protective devices. Protection against overcurrents, including overload and fault currents, must comply with standards such as BS88, BS60429, and BSEN60898. Devices for isolation, switching, control, and monitoring. Isolation. Isolation is a method of switching, and the isolating device is recognized in British standards. Switching. Switching can be for mechanical maintenance, functional switching, or emergency switching. Overvoltage protection. Devices for protection against overvoltage, such as surge protective devices, SPDs, are essential to protect equipment from transient overvoltages. SPDs must be selected and installed according to the lightning protection zone concept. The connecting conductors between SPDs and the main earthing terminal must have a minimum cross-sectional area of 6 mm superscript 2 copper for Type 2 and 16 mm superscript 2 copper for Type 1 SPDs. Undervoltage protection. Devices for protection against undervoltage ensure that equipment is not damaged by a loss of phase or a significant drop in voltage. Coordination of protective devices. Section 536 requires the selection of electrical devices to achieve electrical coordination between them. The coordination should account for short circuit protection, overload protection, and residual current to ensure that the devices do not adversely affect the safety of the installation. Selectivity is important for overcurrent protective devices, so that in the event of a fault, the closest protective device will disconnect the circuit.